Welcome, everyone. I'm Lucas Frommenwiller, Global Corporate Account Manager at Ecolab. Thank you for joining the ILHA webinar on CO2 footprint for luxury hospitality through sustainable cleaning. We'll discuss the link between cleaning and CO2, the importance of choosing the right cleaning agents, and how to reduce the CO2 footprint in luxury hospitality. Today's webinar is brought to you by Ecolab. I'm happy to welcome Marion Zwingenberger, European Expert Institutional Technical Services and Sales Training Team, and Philippe Meunier, Senior Marketing Manager, Sustainability Europe. So let's get started with today's discussion. The agenda will look like this. We start with understanding climate risks and CO2 emissions, CO2 footprint of cleaning products in the overall CO2 calculation for luxury hospitality, discussing the importance of the CO2 footprint for luxury hotels, and last but not least, explaining with examples how effective cleaning processes can lead to energy and CO2 savings. Philippe, everyone is speaking about CO2. Can you explain why it is so important?
Well, Lucas, it is important as CO2 or carbon emission or greenhouse gas emission is a source of climate change. What is known as the greenhouse gas effect is a natural phenomenon. The heat from the sun is coming through the atmosphere and is reflected on Earth and sent back into space. The greenhouse, which is made of this greenhouse gas, enables to keep part of the heat on Earth, which is, by the way, why life is possible on Earth. Otherwise, it would be too cold. But, and it is a big but, the more greenhouse gas are in the atmosphere, the more heat is kept inside. Hence, the temperature increase. Many different gas contribute to this greenhouse gas thing. They stay in the atmosphere for different period of time. For instance, CO2 is staying for 100 years. Methane is staying for a much shorter period, but has a much bigger impact. As a convention, everything is expressed in CO2 equivalent. So, the direct impact of greenhouse gas is clearly the rise of the temperature. Since pre-industrial age, 2,500 billion tons of CO2 have been emitted. And we now are seeing an increase of temperature of 1.1 degrees Celsius. Of course, there has always been some ups and downs in the temperature, as you can see on the graph. But what is certain now, and all the IPCC reports are showing that, we are seeing this increasing of the temperature, and it is due to mankind. The scenarios from IPCC for the end of this century are saying that we'll have a rise of temperature comprised between 1.5 degrees Celsius and 4.5 degrees Celsius, which is a lot. So there are impacts of this climate change or increase of the temperature. The first impact is generally seen through water. Of course, you see water scarcity, but on the other end, you also see some floods, because the full cycle of water is completely changing. Farming, fisheries are impacted also through this climate change. And also the business are impacted in the end, and also population has an increase of risk for health. What we have seen now is that a lot of initiatives are in place to fight against this climate change. The first one is something you all have been aware of. It's the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement is a binding agreement that was signed by nearly all the countries on the planet to limit the temperature change by below 1.5 degrees Celsius. It's a binding agreement, which means that all the countries that have signed this agreement need to take action. In addition, we also see an initiative from the United Nations Global Compact, which is called Business Ambitions, which is engaging companies to take actions to limit the temperature below this 1.5 degrees Celsius rise. And the last one I would like to mention is the one from the European Union under what we call the Green Deal umbrella, which wants to make the European continent the first continent to be climate neutral by 2050, with an intermediate stage of reducing by 55% the CO2 emission of the continent by 2030. So now we know what is the impact of the CO2 footprint. We know what are the measures that are in place to reduce the CO2 footprint. We need to understand where this CO2 is coming from. So there are indeed 3 scopes of CO2. The scope 1 is the direct emission from the companies. So typically, this is the emission that are coming from gas heating or the fuel used in cars that are owned by the company. This is what we call scope 1. The scope 2 is the indirect emissions that are coming from the purchased energy. So generally, it's electricity. So typically, for an hotel, the consumption of the electricity from the lift, from the computers, from the laundry machines in the basement will be in this scope 2. The last one is the scope 3. This is the indirect emission that are not directly owned by the company, but which are important in its value chain. So typically, we will find there all what is purchased. So all the purchased goods from the company will come here. So we have amenities, for instance. We have linen for the bedroom. We have cleaning products. All this kind of stuff will be in the scope 3. Also in the scope 3, you will find the wastes that are produced by the company. And you will also find in this scope 3 the commuting of the staff coming and going back to their home, because it's not in cars that are owned by the company. So it's really in the scope 3. So now that we know what are these 3 scopes, what is the carbon footprint of an hotel? So there are various data showing what are the carbon footprint of an hotel. You have data for Cornell University. You have data from DEFRA, for instance, like the one we are showing there. And what you see on screen is really important to have in mind is that average. So there could be a wide dispersion between countries in a continent. So for instance, because it's mainly linked to the type of energy that is used. So for instance, there will be a high difference for a country with high energy coming from coal compared to a country with high energy coming from wind or nuclear. And there is also a wide dispersion between type of hotel. So for instance, the French Environmental Agency had issued a report a few years back showing that there was a ratio between 1 and 2, between a 2-star hotel and a 5-star hotel. Of course, in a 5-star hotel, you have much more bigger room and you have much more service, so it makes sense that the CO2 footprint is bigger. So now maybe a question to you, Lucas. You have a lot of contact with our customer of the lodging industry. What is the type of question you are receiving when it's dealing with CO2 footprint?
Thanks, Philippe. I think you explained it very well. We are here in the luxury segment. So I think more and more the customers are asking, like, where is your product produced? What is the packaging material? What is kind of the waste potential I can reduce? Which labels you have on your product? So I think the sensitivity around this topic is increasing dramatically, and we want to deliver the right answers to support our customers. So this is just high level. And now, Marion, that was just a bit from my perspective or customer's perspective. Can you provide a broader scope with the experience you have gained in the past few years to talking with more customers and helping them?
Yeah, we in Texof, you can imagine we get a lot of questions from customers, but if I have a look at the most frequently asked questions from our customer, the focus is, like you explained, about eco-labeling, certificates for applications, health issues, packaging material, hazardous labeling of the products, and so on. But we also get more and more questions about sustainability topics. Yes.
And is it a common practice to calculate the CO2 footprint?
Yes, of course. We are seeing trends going there. Like we have been calculating our company's footprint for several years now. So do some other companies and our customers as well, especially large service provider and also hotel chains. And so they ask for the carbon footprint for our products. And yeah, it goes even further here. We also discuss with large companies, service providers, how they can significantly reduce the CO2 footprint in their cleaning area by adapting the product portfolio and also the processes.
And what are the typical motives for this, Marion?
Yeah, clear is the topic of sustainability is becoming more and more important for many companies and hotels, and is also being promoted with a view to the future. Therefore, many customers and our distributors asking about carbon footprint for their products. And this is, of course, also closely related to the fact that next year, the reporting liability, according to the new European Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, will begin. This is mandatory for many big customers. And the aim of this reporting is to create more transparency in regards to companies' sustainability efforts. Even though this only applies in the first step to large companies, it also means that our distributors asked to deliver the CO2 footprint for all products, including our cleaning products. And these questions are therefore also addressed to us, and we provide the corresponding data for our products.
Thanks, Marion. So now again, back to Philippe. I mean, it's highly relevant not only to understand the motives and the best practices, but also the critical areas. Philippe, where are the biggest emissions coming from in the lodging business?
So the main emissions are coming from Scope 3. This is true for all type of organization. What we are seeing in general is that the Scope 3 emissions are accounting for between 70 up to more than 90% of the total emission of a company. And the lodging sector is equivalent to that. So if we are thinking about this 3 scope again, So in the scope 1, as I mentioned before, we have the gas heating, we have the cars, or we have the shuttle, which is owned by the hotel. In the scope 2, you will have all the electricity that you use during your stay at the hotel. So of course, we are thinking about the lifts, but we are also thinking about the dishwashers, about the lightnings, and also probably if you have a swimming pool, about the pumps that are pumping water into this swimming pool. But the biggest part is the scope 3. And in the scope 3, you have everything that is purchased. So for instance, the food, the toilet paper, the cleaning products, but also the furniture, the flowers, if you have flowers. So everything will fall into this scope 3. And in addition, as mentioned before, there are the waste and the transportation of the staff. So it's a huge basket with a lot of different things inside. Some of them can be very small in the end, but in total, scope 3 will be the biggest part. So if we are looking at the cleaning products, which are part of the scope 3 of an hotel, we can try to see where these emissions are coming from the product itself. So if we are looking at a kind of life cycle of a product, you will have, for instance, the packaging of the product that will bring some CO2 footprint to the product. Of course, you can reduce this emission of packaging if you have recycled packaging, or if you are reusing the packaging. This will diminish the impact of the CO2 footprint of this part. Then you have the raw materials, that is the ingredients that are inside the cleaning products. So the raw materials are also emitting CO2. And then by working hard with your supplier, you can reduce the CO2 footprint of this part of the product. Of course, you have the manufacturing part of the product, which is also emitting CO2. And then the last one would be the transportation phase from the plant that is manufacturing the product up to the sites that will use the product. And then there is a big thing that is happening, which we are calling the use phase. The use phase could emit a lot of CO2 too. And the use phase is not part of the product carbon footprint. It's coming on top of that. So the product you are using, for instance, for a dishwasher, let's say the dishwasher detergent, is part of your scope 3. But the electricity of the dishwasher in which you will put the product and your dishes will be part of your scope 2. So the use phase is also important to take into consideration, not to focus only on the product, but also to focus on the use phase of the product.
Thanks, Philippe. Absolutely. That clarifies the complexity. Marion, could you highlight one key aspect of the packaging life cycle for our customers?
Yes, of course, I can do. On one side, what's inside the product, it's very important. But like Philippe explained, the packaging also has a huge impact on the sustainability of a product. The packaging of cleaning products is usually made of plastic. And the CO2 footprint of common plastics, such as polyethylene, polypropylene, or other plastic, is currently around 2 to 5 kilograms of CO2 equivalents per kilogram of polymer, and therefore extremely high. To produce a drum with nearly 900 grams, the CO2 footprint is around between 1.8 to 4.5 kilograms. And like you see on this graphic here on the slide, this can be done also more sustainable. If you reduce water to a minimum from a liquid product and use instead solids or blocks, you can save a huge amount of plastic. At the end, you can save up to 99% of the packaging by using a thin film as a packaging for this block. It is easy to imagine the positive effect, from mountains of empty canister to a small foil packaging with 7 grams. And we also see a very high amount of CO2 during transportation, as we do not transport so much water. That is an additional saving for the calculation of the CO2 footprint. The same also applies to ready-to-use products for instance, spray bottles compared to high concentrated products in pouches, and a spray bottle used several times. Here also up to 99% of packaging can be saved according to our model calculation. Of course, the exact figures depend on the dosage and the packaging weights.
Great, Marion. So for our audience, do you have another specific example to better understand the concept?
Yeah, I'm happy to explain this. When customers compare the price and the CO2 footprint of cleaning products, it is important to consider whether the product is a concentrate or a ready-to-use product. What is already diluted in the application solution in the corresponding packaging. The CO2 footprint and the price of liter of a highly concentrated product is quite often much higher than that of a ready-to-use product in the same packaging unit. This can easily explain, since the amount of chemicals used in the highly concentrated product is much higher than in a ready-to-use product, like Philip explained. This would mean that if I compare only the CO2 footprint of these two products on a one-to-one basis, it will end up choosing the ready-to-use product with the lower CO2 footprint. But probably sometimes it is not considered that you need much more ready-to-use product bottles instead of the highly concentrated product. We have carried out an example, a calculation here on the slide. You see with a concentration of 0.25%. And it turns out that you need 400 bottles of a ready-to-use product compared to 1 liter of a highly concentrated product. So you can imagine how much additional CO2 footprint is generated by the ready-to-use bottles. And like I and Philip already mentioned, this applies to both packaging, transport, as well as waste disposal. It is therefore very important not only to look at the CO2 footprint of the product alone, but also to carry out calculations based on the annual consumption quantity. And if a high concentrated product are then offered in lightweight packaging or recycled packaging, and an exact dosage is carried out by using automatic dosing devices, further CO2 is saved.
Great. So what specific plans or recommendation do you have for cleaning, Marion?
Yeah, my recommendation as a summary for hotels is if you want to reduce the carbon footprint when it comes to cleaning, make sure that the processes used for cleaning need as little water and energy as possible. Reduce the temperatures, decrease the temperatures, and use products high concentrated as possible to reduce the plastic packaging as much as possible.
And does it make sense to extend the cleaning intervals and encourage customers to do without housekeeping by offering incentives?
Yeah, of course, extending the cleaning intervals can save a huge amount of staff effort, which we don't have today. To offer customers small incentives like you get a drink at the bar or you get a small gift if you don't have to have your room cleaned every day. This can save a lot of work done daily. And of course, it could also save the amount of laundry to be washed. The change of towels and bath towels will probably reduce.
And to which extent could this result in savings in the washing of laundry and in the consumption of cleaning agents?
Yeah, we should not forget, and I can remind you only about this. If you extend the cleaning intervals, then it could be that you have more stubborn residues. For instance, scale in the shower, you have residues on the floors, on the furniture, which might be easily removed by daily cleaning. But after drying during several days, the cleaning need to be done with a much higher effort, and it could be that a higher concentrated product is necessary, or you need a higher concentration of the used products. It could also be that stronger products, also with hazardous labeling, are needed to remove scale or other dried residues. Unfortunately, the interior and material can break more quickly under that. If you add this up and look at the total carbon footprint, I really think there will be not any savings here. And at the end, every hotel, and especially a luxury hotel, is about making me feel completely at ease as a guest. For me personally, includes a daily room service.
Interesting, Marion. So it's still a bit tricky. So Philip, how does packaging of cleaning products impact your work?
So packaging, I think Marion has explained a lot about packaging and the impact of the packaging. So this could be a nice way to reduce the carbon footprint of a product by also moving from virgin plastic to recycled plastic, because the carbon footprint of recycled plastic is lower. And also trying to do some reuse, so it depends on the size of the packaging, but reusing the packaging is also a good way to reduce the emission. We cannot get rid 100% of the packaging, because the packaging is also helping transporting the products and also protecting the people during the manipulation. But moving to higher concentrated product, recycled plastic or reused plastic is a good way to diminish this part of the carbon footprint of a product.
Great. And maybe for the audience to have a bit of comparison, what is the overall strategy of Ecolab and net zero future?
Yes. Okay. So our target is to be net zero by 2050. We have also 2030 intermediate goals to reduce our scope 1 and scope 2 by 2030 by 50%, and our scope 3 by 25% on the same date. So and we are in line in 2033, as it is shown in our growth and impact report. And these targets are SBTI, which means Science-Based Target Initiative, which means that they are really based on a real reduction on carbon footprint. But it's not all. We have also an addition 2030 goal to help our customers reducing their own carbon footprint and eliminating 6 million tons of CO2 through our service and programs with our customers. So we are acting internally, but we are also supporting our customer reducing their carbon emissions. So that's being said, we need to have a look at tourism as a whole. And tourism is estimated to account for 8% of the total CO2 emissions. So it's important to move forward on that to have an impact on climate and also mitigate business risks. In addition, we also saw that tourists are more and more demanding. We saw now that 83% of tourists say they say that sustainability or staying in a sustainability place is important for them, and 78% want to stay in a sustainable place in the near future. So having a carbon reduction program is part of the sustainability approach that will also attract tourists. So the climate change has an impact in our daily life. This is including places where we are eating or staying. European Union is engaged with an ambitious program of CO2 reduction within the Green Deal. However, everyone needs to increase the speed of action towards greenhouse gas emission because the temperature have already risen by 1.1 degrees Celsius, and that has a lot of impact. So, of course, lodging has to do its share, and we can support there. You can support in your energy reduction around the kitchen or around the laundry. And we can also optimize the CO2 emissions through improved cleaning processes, as explained by Marion. So I will conclude with 3 pieces of advice on your CO2 reduction journey. So the first one is really build the awareness within your team around climate change. Your team is the key factor for success. So engage your team in the CO2 reduction. They will engage your guests for sure. Then with your team, identify opportunities in greenhouse gas reduction in the hotel. Then the second one is take actions. For instance, challenge the status quo in cleaning procedure and adopt new one as explained by Marion. And then communicate the results to your team because this is bringing motivation to them to move forward. And the last one is also very important. Take an holistic approach. Reduce carbon footprint, but also try to improve your cleaning performance, or at least to maintain your cleaning performance. And then also try to protect your people with better cleaning performance for safety purposes. And also take into consideration other metrics like water, which was also mentioned by Marion during this call. So maybe for the last words, up to you, Lucas.
Thank you, Marion and Philippe. To close, we'd like to thank you all for joining the International Luxury Hotel Association's webinar series. Contact us to learn more by leveraging the shown QR codes. If you found this webinar to be of value, please share a recording and reach out.